Hey, we've got a problem here.
What did you do?
Nothing. I stirred the tanks.
Whoa. Hey.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we have a problem.
Welcome back to Thinking Critical. This is Wes. Perch and I have been talking about different periods of time, kind of recent within, DC Comics. We talked about Rebirth. We talked about New 52. Wanted to go back to a recent time in Marvel Comics, the all new, all different era, and some of the mistakes that were made there that kind of also rolled into the Marvel Legacy era that we had. And obviously here with me to talk about that is the man from Comics by Perch. How are you doing, Perch?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
So this is interesting things. I think a lot of people have very emotional responses to all new, all different. Because there is so much change. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that Marvel Comics and anyone could learn is that you can't wholesale change all of your heroes at the same time.
Well, yeah, and it followed up several other big brand changes. I mean, they'd been doing these different kind of shifts of their line about every year to 2 years. And this was this period where I think customers had finally become aware that Marvel was going to pull the rug out from under them about every 18 months. And I think a lot of customers also who were pretty irritated that comics were constantly getting rebooted and everything else also were getting annoyed. I mean, so it was like this all new, all different Marvel, I think was called 2015, and it followed up Secret Wars in terms of timeline. And it was a ton of new number ones. They did a time skip during this time. They changed a bunch of legacy characters, and the Marvel Universe was very unrecognizable at this point. And I also think that for a lot of customers, they viewed Hickman's conclusion of Secret Wars as an ending of sorts. So
I've heard that multiple times.
Yeah,
that was their end to Marvel 616.
Yeah, it was, and Hickman was very loved at that point, and I don't know that Marvel completely understood. In fact, it sounded like at the time there was a little bit of tension that Hickman concluded everything so definitively. I don't think Marvel's editorial was necessarily thrilled with how that wrapped up because it did feel like an ending. And so then they launched right into this all new, all different Marvel, and it was, across the board, it had so many problems.
None more than just changing out the heroes. And one of the things that I think is a mischaracterization is that you can't change, the hero under the mantle. That's certainly been done before. Wally West replaced the Flash, and he was accepted. Kyle Rayner replaced, as the Green Lantern, he was accepted. Miles Morales has certainly been accepted as a Spider-Man. Even Jane Foster as Thor initially was really well liked.
Yeah.
You can do these things individually, but doing it as a wholesale change, not only, you're changing all the characters and you're bringing in all new writers on the titles. That is so much change at one time. And literally it ended up being too much for customers to handle.
Well, yeah, it did. I mean, people need something to ground themselves with. They need to be able to at least recognize what they've been collecting and loving and enjoying. And so if you radically shift everything simultaneously all at once, what's there for them to anchor themselves on? And I think you had a bunch of controversial choices. I mean, keep in mind that this was the kind of the last big moment. I mean, it would play out for a few years where the X-Men rights were tied up with Fox. People were already irritated with what was going on there. And so Marvel kind of simultaneously put the X-Men into a really weird state. They continue to enhance the...
Yeah, Wolverine's dead at the time, right?
Yeah, Wolverine is dead and replaced with an old man version of Wolverine from the Mark Millar days. Laura is officially Wolverine, and they plaster her in Wolverine's costume, the blue and yellow one, which just looked bizarre on the character. I mean, every piece of this looked strange. And you just all over the place. It was a very goofy time for Marvel.
Well, when they start replacing characters, even like Captain America gets replaced by Falcon.
Yep, Sam Wilson is Cap.
And Sam Wilson is unrecognizable as Cap. He no longer sounds like the same character.
No, that's right. I mean, it's and that was one of the big pains is that I think Reminder did a good job of telling a story that led up to Sam taking the mantle. I think he actually did a lot of work in order to get him there. And then once he was there, they immediately throw him into the leader of the Avengers, and he turns into like this hard kind of military-like personality, which did not resemble Sam Wilson at all. It was a very strange moment. I mean, you took Deadpool and you had him suddenly. Deadpool's like a billionaire and he's funding the Avengers. It's like
Mad Lib's comics, Perch.
Yes, it was, and it was very odd. I mean, Bendis took over Iron Man during this time and introduced Riri, and had Doctor Doom as the other Iron Man, which was, I mean, just you can kind of go down the list, and everything was bizarre.
Yeah, nothing's recognizable. And the weirdest thing about all this, Perch, even outside of comics, you've got the Avengers, like MCU franchise, is the most profitable. It's becoming the most profitable media franchise in the history of movies.
Yes.
All the characters are completely recognizable. Every corner of the globe knows who Tony Stark is as Iron Man, knows who Steve Rogers is as Captain America, that Bruce Banner is Hulk. And so you have all these characters that they build so much time in and marketing. Everybody knows who these characters are. But if you go into your comic shop, you can't find them.
No, you can't. And the Avengers title that you picked up would have Miss Marvel and Nova and Miles Morales and Vision and Iron Man. But Iron Man is broke, and Vision is kind of taken over. I mean, he's doing strange things with Kang at the time, trying to kill him as a baby. I mean, it's the characters, the personalities are radically different. Jane Foster is Thor at that moment. And so nothing, as you say, nothing resembled the movies or resembled even the comic line of the last 50 odd years. So it was, some change is good. And I do think change is fine. And you need to constantly be evolving and moving. But like you said, not everything simultaneously all at once. And it wasn't just the launch that was a problem. The first kind of storylines coming out of it would be the Avengers standoff, where as soon as we get Sam Wilson in the Captain America costume, we then de-age Steve Rogers and get him in a Captain America costume as well. So like just a couple months into it, we reverse everything. And then you've got this Civil War II storyline looming, which is just that's the first thing.
Train wreck.
Yeah, the Civil War II was the first big event to come out of All New, All Different. And again, like you said, train wreck.
So many terrible things just about that event. We should do an entire retrospective on Civil War II.
Yeah, that would be a depressing time. Yes.
What's interesting about this is at the time, Axel Alonso is the EIC, and it feels like a lot of the blame is laid on him, as if he's this, this huge, progressive person that wanted all these changes to go through. And it's really weird because if you look leading up to these changes, when people were fighting back on Tim Seeley writing Blade, Axel Alonso was like, that's bullcrap. And Axel Alonso was actually fighting a lot of what was happening on Twitter and some of the message boards, trying to implement all these changes from the outside on Marvel, into Marvel Comics. And he was fighting that. All of a sudden, he's not fighting it. He's releasing this line. It doesn't feel like it was probably Axel Alonso's plan, but he really gets a lot of the blame for that.
He does, and it does feel a little bit like he gave up to some extent during this. Like he was, history again. He was fighting a number of these things. The interviews and the receipts are out there. It is a kind of a bizarre magic trick that people like Tom Brevoort and several of the other editors, Joe Quesada as well, heading the company, kind of escape a lot of the criticism of this era, and it all goes on Alonso. And Alonso would basically, about a year later, be released from the company and go off to do his own thing. And in would come C.V. Cebulski, and if anything, a lot of these kind of tactics doubled down under Cebulski. So it is strange. You're right. It's been one of those odd things. This would be a good video. Why did Axel Alonso take all the heat when there are clearly other people running the show? I mean, what was odd is with Marvel Now, and because they did Marvel Now 2.0 following Civil War, Tom Breedmore did all the quotes and the comments out of that, talking about revitalizing, talking about refreshing, talking about bringing out, not relying on legacy characters. I mean, he was making all these statements, but regardless of that, it still all went on Alonso, and it's very bizarre.
It is very bizarre. If you look at his publishing line that he runs now, AWA Studios,
yeah,
there are comic books for both sides. Like there's stuff that is clearly for more conservative people and more for more progressive people. He seems to be equal opportunity as far as providing content out there. It doesn't feel like he's leaning one way or the other.
Alonso likes to make money. That's the crazy part about him. But anyway, it's weird. He's cited as being kind of the person who helmed all this. But again, if you read the quotes, you read what people were saying, you see who was making the decisions. I mean, publicly, not behind the scenes. I mean, but what was actually stated on like Marvel.com. Alonso was quiet, and that's maybe one of the more peculiar things about this is he typically was more in front of things, but when All New, All Different Marvel came around, he, like you said, he faded. He got much more silent during this period.
He did. There's a couple of public outbursts that happened. One of them in particular is from I guess he's the marketing guy, right? David Gabriel.
David Gabriel, yeah.
Where he does an interview and he's like, yeah, our sales numbers are down. Nobody wants these new diverse characters. He accidentally said it out loud, and he got a ton of pushback.
Yeah. No, I mean, internally in the company, he was pushed to retract that. Absolutely. It was a weird period for Marvel, and it was one of those that I guess for me gets very, very frustrating. And we've talked about this before, I think even off the air too, is that, it's a hard business, but when you make mistakes that anyone can see coming, I mean, like you could go to any comic fan, new or old, and say, hey, if we take our entire lineup and we radically change all the characters, we put in new things and we make it unrecognizable, how do you think the fans will react? Everybody knows how the fans are going to react to that, but it seemed to befuddle Marvel. They spent a year to 2 years denying it was happening, and then being angry with the fans for it happening, and just doing anything other than saying, maybe we changed too much too fast.
This is about the time when they had the San Diego Comic-Con retailers meeting, right?
Yeah, that was New York. I think you're talking about where some of the retailers objected and shouted at Gabriel and some others, and yeah.
And then all the publications, all the websites and stuff started portraying these alt-right, racist comic shop owners who are like, hey, listen, we just want comics we could sell. What are you doing? You can't change all the heroes.
I love the websites of the alt-right comic retailer from San Francisco who was saying, because as we know, San Francisco is a big alt-right community for sure. But it is. No, for sure. I mean, the sales slumped bad during this period. And then a number of other things were going on. And Reminder had been kind of chased out of the company. Bendis was going on to Iron Man. He did, as we mentioned, Civil War II. But he was clearly, uninspired at that point. Yeah. And he would leave to go to DC. He was sick also during that time period. So there was, everything was going on. If you look at some of the names, like, Jeff Lemire, Charles Soule, Dennis Hopeless, Mark Waid. These are the people who are on a lot of these books. I mean, the book that was
Dan Slott.
Yeah, and that's the guy. So the thing that was successful during this period was Dan Slott. People probably don't want to hear it, but that was the one that worked.
That's all you need to know. And it's strange, and it kind of carries over into this Marvel Legacy initiative that they did. And this is about the time that CB Cebulski comes in.
Yes.
And this thing is so strange. They do all these one-shots with the original hero and the new character on the mantle.
Right.
And if you read them, and almost every single one of them, it's the established hero like slurping the new hero and telling the reader how much better this new version is than they are.
Yeah, it was a very uninspired time. And I'd heard from one of the writers that basically they got the pitch from the editor, of the editor saying, we want this annual, we want this one shot, and we want this issue. And the purpose of it is for the new character to be supported and boosted by the old character. And they kind of gave them the template of what to write. And then sure enough, like you said, you read all those issues and it's like, they're all the same. It's the exact same story over and over again.
It's unreadable. Nobody wants to see a character get elevated by the character they love telling you how much better the new version is.
No, nobody wants that. And, you know, the other part that's kind of interesting in this is there was a kind of I don't know about a mandate, but there was a push to deprioritize the villains during this period. And that's been admitted. It's come from editorial that, you know, from Tom Brevoort in The Office, that we want the focus to be on the heroes. We want to build these new heroes. And so the message went out to, you know, let the villains just get plowed through really easily. Don't have it be, you know, don't show a lot of weakness. We need to build these heroes up as quick as we can. And that
Silver Age DC before Crisis.
Yeah, that's a terrible idea. Like, just a terrible plan for everything. And yeah, but it is weird to see kind of the list of people. You know, Chelsea Kane did a series, Chuck Wendig did a series, Warren Ellis was on Karnak. I mean, if you go down the list of creators that are on this thing, it is Kate Leth is on Hellcat. You get a very crazy assortment of people. Becky Cloonan on The Punisher. I mean, it is that has got to be the weirdest pairing anyone's ever told me. I didn't realize she wrote Punisher. Yeah, Becky Cloonan writing and you know, rest in peace, Steve Dillon on art. And I mean, this is one of the last things Steve Dillon would do, which depresses me immensely. But this was when Ta-Nehisi Coates came into the series. It was just what's funny is you look at this, and the majority of creators during this period, or at least half of them, are gone. Like, they're long gone in the last 5 years. Yeah, it's crazy. And I remember going to Heroes and Fantasies in San Antonio, Texas. I lived in San Antonio at the time. And if you went back to their comic section, the amount of Marvel Legacy comics, specifically with venticular covers, you could get, you know, 50 sets of them. They must have just been shipping them free of charge. There was during this period, it was probably the highest amount of overships that they'd done in their history. 2016, 2017 was just a massive amount of overshipping happening for Marvel as they were really trying to get these things going. But I mean, yeah, this era gave us the start of Tom King. He did the Vision during the year, and Colin Bunn was just writing so much stuff, and that's always a crazy choice. It is. And of course, this is the time that CB Cebulski comes in, and I think people think that their voices have been heard. Yeah. That there's going to be this phenomenal amount of change. As soon as he gets in there, somebody has tipped off, I think it's Bleeding Cool, that he was using a pen name when he was writing manga in Japan, and just cut the knees right out from underneath him. Yeah, it's interesting. I'd love to do some investigation about kind of what all went on there, because it was an interesting moment where, I mean, within a week of him joining, this Japanese pen name came out, which was funny because Marvel definitely knew about that. I mean, they knew exactly. He was working for Marvel when he did it. Yes, I mean, and there's enough comments to suggest that Marvel suggested he do that, because what I mean, not to just bring out the next Bleeding Cool article, but there were a few writers who wrote under either Japanese or Spanish pen names during the 90s because Marvel thought that was a good idea, and I mean, they just, you know, let's make it sound local. I mean, yeah, I was talking with the Bloodstone Hunt with Joe, and we're seeing that you know, Larry, who is it? Ralph is listed as Ralph San at various points when they're in Japan. So I mean, it just anyway, this was a common thing, but this gets out there. It does seem to make him stumble right out the gate. But I also think Cebulski was going to do exactly what he did regardless. I think the people who thought he was going to come in and clean house, I mean, they point to the cancellation of things like Gabby Rivera's, America Chavez, but that book was ending anyway. Like, that was, I think he got the credit for ending that title, but it was over when he stepped in. So anyway, interesting moment in time. Absolutely. I think we'll see all new, all different, you know, moving into Legacy as an enormous failed experiment, following up on some other enormous failed experiments from Marvel. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. I don't know. What do you think the lesson learned out of this is? It's just, you can't change all your characters at once. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it's really obvious ones. Like, every person listening to this right now knows, like, don't change all your characters at once. Don't, I mean,
don't put Kate Leth on a major, comic book.
Yeah, no, don't. I mean, this is when we had CM Punk writing Drax.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, a lot of strange choices, but anyway,
gimmickry. It never works.
No, this was anyway. Anyone could have looked at this and saw it was a train wreck in the making, and it was.
The writing was on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine Axel Alonso is probably happier where he's at now, but I do think he gets a bad rap. If people go and look at the quotes before all this stuff happens, I don't think it's his idea.
No, it's he. That I'd love to know, like, who was the mastermind who was able to shift all the blame onto Alonso, because he definitely took all the heat, and it was clearly, I mean, clearly at this point we could tell it wasn't his doing. So.
All right, Perch. Well, do you have anything else to say about these eras, or is it time to call this one quits?
Let's call. We'll do that Civil War retrospective and drink. Sounds good.
We got to. That'll be rough.
Yeah.
All right, later, brother.
Later.